Dutch Schultz walked into Stephanie St. Clair's office with 12 armed men. He demanded she bow down. Her 60-second response ignited the bloodiest war Harlem had ever seen. October 14, 1931. The most dangerous man in New York stood face to face with the most fearless woman in Harlem. What happened in that room changed organized crime forever. This is the untold story of the moment Stephanie St. Clair, the queen of numbers, proved that respect cannot be taken by force. The moment she declared war on the entire Italian mob. The moment 60 seconds of pure courage rewrote the rules of power in 1930s America. Chapter 1. The Queen's Empire. Stephanie St. Clair ruled Harlem from a modest office above a barbershop on 125th Street. Born in Guadeloupe, she arrived in New York in 1912 with nothing but fierce determination and a razor-sharp mind for mathematics. By 1930, she controlled the most profitable numbers racket in American history. The numbers game was simple. Poor folks bet nickels and dimes on 3-digit combinations. If their number hit, they won 40 to 1. For people making $7 a week, that nickel represented hope. And hope was currency in Depression-era Harlem. Stephanie understood something her competitors didn't. She wasn't just running a gambling operation, she was providing a community service. When players won, they paid rent, bought medicine, fed their families. When they lost, they dreamed of tomorrow. Stephanie made sure the game was honest, the payouts fair, and the community protected. By 1931, her operation generated $2 million annually. She employed 300 runners, paid protection money to 40 corrupt cops, and commanded the loyalty of every street corner from 110th to 145th Street. The French accented voice that had once begged for work in Harlem's factories now commanded an empire. But empires attract wolves, and the biggest wolf in New York was Arthur Flegenheimer, known to the world as Dutch Schultz. Chapter 2. The Bronx Butcher. Dutch Schultz was everything Stephanie wasn't. Where she was calculated, he was brutal. Where she built loyalty, he ruled through fear. Where she protected her community, he exploited everything he touched. Dutch had made his fortune bootlegging during Prohibition, smuggling beer from Canada and terrorizing rival operations with unprecedented violence. His crew didn't just kill competitors, they tortured them publicly, sending messages that echoed through New York's underworld like thunder. By 1930, Dutch controlled illegal alcohol throughout the Bronx, Manhattan's East Side, and half of Brooklyn. He was worth an estimated $50 million. His political connections reached the mayor's office. His corruption network included judges, prosecutors, and police captains. When Dutch Schultz wanted something, he took it. But Prohibition was dying. The government was moving toward legalization. Smart gangsters were diversifying their portfolios, and the smartest gangsters were looking at Harlem's numbers racket. Dutch saw $2 million flowing through black hands and decided it should flow through his. He'd crushed Irish gangs in Hell's Kitchen. He'd eliminated Jewish competition on the Lower East Side. How hard could it be to intimidate one woman in Harlem? Dutch Schultz was about to learn that some people cannot be intimidated. Chapter 3. The Warning, September 1931. Dutch's lieutenant, Abe Weinberg, approached several of Stephanie's runners on Lenox Avenue. The message was simple. Dutch Schultz is coming to Harlem. Smart people will choose the winning side. Some of Stephanie's runners panicked. They'd heard stories about Dutch's methods. Bodies found in cement barrels. Enemies who disappeared and were never found. Families who received their loved ones' fingers in envelopes with no return address. But Stephanie St. Clair had faced down racist police, corrupt politicians, and rival numbers operators for 20 years. She'd built her empire through intelligence, courage, and absolute refusal to bow to anyone. Dutch Schultz would learn that lesson the hard way. Stephanie called a meeting of her top lieutenants in the back room of Small's Paradise on 135th Street. 20 men and women who'd helped build the most successful black-owned business in Harlem history. Dutch Schultz thinks he can walk into our neighborhood and take what we built, she said in her distinctive French accent. He thinks because we're black, because I'm a woman, we'll hand over our empire without a fight. The room was silent. Everyone knew what war with Dutch Schultz meant. Bodies in the streets, families destroyed. An organization that had taken 20 years to build could be dismantled in 20 days. I'm not ordering anyone to fight, Stephanie continued. If you want to leave, leave now. Take whatever money you have and disappear. I won't think less of you. Nobody moved. But if you stay, understand this. We're not just fighting for money. We're fighting for respect. For the right to build something in our own community without asking permission from white gangsters who think they own everything. She looked each person in the eyes. Dutch Schultz wants a war. Let's give him one he'll never forget. Rehook number 1. But Stephanie St. Clair had no idea that Dutch Schultz wasn't planning to send more warnings. He was coming personally. And what he planned to do to the Queen of Numbers would either break her empire or turn her into a legend. Chapter 4. The Invasion. October 14th, 1931, 3:47 p.m. Dutch Schultz's black Cadillac convoy rolled down 125th Street like an occupying army. 4 cars, each carrying armed men in expensive suits. The kind of men who killed for money and slept peacefully afterward. Harlem residents scattered from the sidewalks. Shopkeepers closed their doors. Children disappeared into alleys. Everyone knew what those cars meant. Violence was coming. Dutch stepped out of the lead car wearing a charcoal gray suit that cost more than most Harlem families made in a year. He was 39 years old, built like a boxer with cold blue eyes that had watched too many men die. Behind him came 12 soldiers, each carrying enough firepower to level a city block. They walked directly to Stephanie's building, past the barbershop, up the narrow stairs to the second-floor office where the Queen of Numbers conducted her business. Dutch's footsteps echoed in the stairwell like gunshots. Stephanie was sitting behind her mahogany desk, reviewing the day's receipts. She wore a navy blue dress with white pearls, her signature style, professional, elegant, unintimidated. She didn't look up when the door opened. "Mrs. St. Clair," Dutch said, removing his fedora. His voice was gravelly, the voice of a man who'd smoked too many cigars and made too many threats. "Mr. Flegenheimer," she replied without raising her eyes from the papers. She refused to use his street name, refused to acknowledge his reputation. In her office, he was just another man trying to take what didn't belong to him. Dutch's jaw tightened. Nobody had called him by his real name in 15 years. It was a calculated insult, a reminder that Stephanie St. Clair wasn't playing by his rules. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Dutch said, walking closer to the desk. "My people came to talk to your people last month. They explained the new arrangement, but somehow my message didn't get through." Stephanie finally looked up. Her dark eyes met his blue ones without flinching. "Your message was received clearly. I chose to ignore it." The 12 men behind Dutch shifted position. Hands moved toward waistbands. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Dutch smiled, not a friendly smile, the smile of a predator who'd cornered prey. "See, that's where the misunderstanding comes in. You think you have a choice. You think this is a negotiation." He leaned forward, placing both hands on her desk. "Let me clarify the situation. I'm Dutch Schultz. I own everything illegal in this city. Numbers, liquor, protection, all of it. And I'm tired of watching black people make white money in my territory." Stephanie's expression didn't change. "This is not your territory." "Everything in New York City is my territory," Dutch said. His voice grew louder, harder. I've killed men for less than what you've been doing. I've buried entire organizations for thinking they could operate without my permission. He straightened up, adjusted his tie. But I'm not an unreasonable man. I'm willing to offer you a position in the new structure. You can keep running day-to-day operations. Handle the black customers who trust you. In exchange, I take 70% of the profits. You get 30% and the privilege of staying alive. Stephanie stood up slowly. She was 5 feet 6 inches tall, nearly a foot shorter than Dutch, but somehow she seemed to tower over him. Are you finished? Almost. Dutch's smile widened. The alternative is simple. Refuse my offer and I destroy everything you've built. I kill your runners, burn your buildings, and turn your loyal customers into terrified witnesses. Then I take 100% of the profits anyway. He gestured to his men. I've brought enough firepower to level this entire block. I own enough cops to make sure no one investigates the fire. I have enough judges to ensure no one goes to prison for what happens next. Dutch leaned forward again. So here's my final offer. Bow down to Dutch Schultz, take your 30% and live to see tomorrow. Or stand up to Dutch Schultz and join the 50 men who thought they were tougher than me. The room was silent except for the sound of breathing and the distant hum of Harlem traffic below. Stephanie St. Clair looked at Dutch Schultz for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked everyone in the room. She laughed, not a nervous laugh, not a frightened giggle. A genuine, delighted laugh, as if Dutch had just told her the funniest joke she'd ever heard. Mr. Flegenheimer, she said, her French accent making each word sharp and precise. You walk into my office with guns and threats thinking you can intimidate me because I'm black and a woman. You think I'll bow down because you've killed white men who were afraid of you. She walked around her desk until she was standing directly in front of him. But you've made one critical mistake. What mistake? Dutch asked. His smile was gone. Something in Stephanie's voice, her posture, her complete lack of fear was making him nervous. You think I'm afraid to die. Rehook Tumter 2. What Stephanie St. Clair said in the next 60 seconds would either end her life or launch the most vicious gang war in New York history. Dutch Schultz was about to learn that some people cannot be bought, cannot be threatened, and cannot be broken. Chapter 5. 60 Seconds. That changed history. Stephanie St. Clair looked Dutch Schultz directly in the eyes and began speaking in a voice that cut through the tension like a blade. You want to know what I think of your offer? I think you're a pathetic bully who preys on people weaker than you. I think you've spent so many years terrorizing scared men that you've forgotten what real courage looks like. Dutch's hand moved toward his waistband. Stephanie didn't flinch. Let me explain something about Harlem, Mr. Flegenheimer. We've been fighting for respect since the day we arrived in this country. Fighting racist police who beat us for sport. Fighting landlords who overcharge us because we're black. Fighting a system designed to keep us in chains even after slavery ended. Her voice grew louder, stronger. You think your 12 guns scare me? I've been shot at by cops who wear badges and claim to represent justice. You think your threats intimidate me? I've been threatened by politicians who make laws designed to destroy my people. She stepped closer to Dutch, close enough to smell his expensive cologne, close enough to see the uncertainty growing in his eyes. You want me to bow down? Here's my response. Stephanie reached into her desk drawer. Dutch's men raised their weapons. The sound of hammers clicking back filled the room. But Stephanie didn't pull out a gun. She pulled out a photograph. This is a picture of Dutch Schultz's brewery in the Bronx, she said, holding it up so everyone could see. Taken 3 days ago by one of my associates. Notice the NYPD patrol car parked outside? Notice Captain O'Malley shaking hands with your foreman? Dutch's face went pale. That brewery was supposed to be secret, protected by a network of corrupt cops and politicians. Stephanie pulled out another photograph. This is Dutch Schultz's accountant meeting with Judge Morrison at Delmonico's restaurant. They're discussing which cases to dismiss and which prosecutors to reassign. She pulled out a third photograph. This is Dutch Schultz himself, delivering a briefcase full of money to District Attorney Thompson's personal residence. Stephanie set all three photographs on her desk where everyone could see them clearly. I have 17 more just like these. Different locations, different officials, different crimes. Enough evidence to send you to the electric chair 3 times over. The room was dead silent. Dutch's men looked at each other uncertainly. This wasn't how these meetings usually went. Here's what's going to happen, Stephanie continued. You're going to walk out of my office, you're going to get in your car, you're going to drive back to the Bronx, and you're never going to set foot in Harlem again. Dutch found his voice. You're bluffing. You wouldn't dare release those photographs. I'd kill you before they reached the newspapers. Stephanie smiled. The same delighted smile she'd given when he first threatened her. Mr. Flegenheimer, those photographs aren't with me. They're with associates in Boston, Philadelphia, and Chicago. Men who have strict instructions. If anything happens to me, if I disappear, if I die in any suspicious circumstances, every newspaper in America gets copies. She leaned back against her desk, completely relaxed. But that's not the best part. The best part is what happens to your political protection. You think Captain O'Malley will keep taking your money when his picture is on the front page of the New York Times? You think Judge Morrison will dismiss your cases when everyone knows he's corrupt? Dutch's jaw worked silently. He was calculating, planning, trying to find a way out of the trap Stephanie had laid. You have 60 seconds to leave my office, Stephanie said, checking her watch. 59, 58, 57. This isn't over, Dutch snarled. You just declared war on Dutch Schultz. You have no idea what that means. 53, 52, 51. Dutch's men were getting nervous. They'd never seen their boss back down from anyone. They'd never seen him outmaneuvered so completely. I'll destroy everything you've built, Dutch said. I'll burn Harlem to the ground. 45, 44, 43. You think those photographs protect you? I'll find them. I'll kill everyone who has them. 37, 36, 35. Dutch realized he was trapped. Stephanie St. Clair had done something no gangster in New York had ever managed. She'd gained leverage over Dutch Schultz, real leverage. The kind that could destroy his entire organization. This conversation isn't over, Dutch said, backing toward the door. 28, 27, 26. Dutch's men followed him toward the exit, confused, angry, but obedient. I'll remember this, Dutch said from the doorway. I'll remember every word. 15, 14, 13. Dutch Schultz walked out of Stephanie St. Clair's office. For the first time in 20 years, he'd been outplayed. For the first time in his criminal career, he'd been forced to retreat. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stephanie sat back down at her desk and returned to reviewing her receipts as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened. In 60 seconds, the Queen of Numbers had declared war on the most dangerous gangster in America. And somehow, impossibly, she'd won the first battle. Rehooked number 3. But Dutch Schultz wasn't the kind of man who accepted defeat gracefully. What he did next would turn Harlem into a war zone and make Stephanie St. Clair the most hunted woman in New York. The real battle was just beginning. Chapter 6. The Retaliation. Dutch Schultz returned to his Bronx headquarters in a rage. The chop house on East 149th Street had witnessed plenty of violence over the years, but nothing like what was about to unfold. She humiliated me, Dutch screamed, throwing a chair across the room. A black woman made Dutch Schultz look like a fool in front of my men. His lieutenants stood in silence. They'd never seen their boss lose control like this. Dutch Schultz's reputation was built on cold, calculated violence. But Stephanie St. Clair had gotten under his skin. "Boss," said Abe Weinberg carefully, "maybe we should think this through. If she really has those photographs—" Dutch backhanded him across the face. Abe staggered backward, blood streaming from his nose. "Are you suggesting I'm afraid of some pictures?" Dutch snarled. "Are you suggesting Dutch Schultz backs down from anyone?" The room went dead quiet. Everyone knew the wrong answer could be fatal. Dutch began pacing, his mind working through the problem. Stephanie St. Clair had outmaneuvered him tactically, but strategy was about more than single battles. She'd won the first confrontation, but wars weren't decided in offices. They were decided in the streets. "She wants a war?" Dutch said quietly. "Let's give her a war." Over the next month, Dutch launched a campaign of terror against Stephanie's organization. Her runners were beaten and intimidated. Her collection points were robbed. Her customers were threatened with violence if they continued playing her numbers. But Stephanie fought back with methods Dutch didn't expect. She didn't match his violence with violence. Instead, she used his aggression against him. Every time Dutch's men attacked her operation, Stephanie made sure the newspapers heard about it. She portrayed herself as a legitimate businesswoman being persecuted by white gangsters trying to steal from the black community. She turned Dutch Schultz from predator into villain in the court of public opinion. More importantly, she began releasing those photographs. Not all at once, one at a time, strategically to maximum effect. The first photograph, showing Captain O'Malley at Dutch's brewery, appeared in the Amsterdam News on November 15, 1931. O'Malley was suspended pending investigation. Dutch lost his primary police protection in the Bronx. The second photograph, showing Judge Morrison accepting money, hit the New York Herald Tribune 2 weeks later. Morrison resigned in disgrace. 3 of Dutch's pending cases went to trial with hostile judges. By December 1931, Dutch Schultz's political protection was crumbling. The photographs Stephanie had gathered were destroying the corruption network he'd spent 20 years building. But Dutch wasn't finished. If he couldn't intimidate Stephanie with threats, if he couldn't destroy her through political connections, he'd eliminate her the old-fashioned way. Chapter 7. The Hunt. December 20th, 1931. Dutch put a $50,000 bounty on Stephanie St. Clair's head. $50,000 in Depression-era money was worth more than $500,000 today. Every gunman in New York started hunting the Queen of Numbers. Stephanie went into hiding, moving between safe houses in Harlem, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. But she didn't stop fighting. From the shadows, she continued coordinating her numbers operation and planning Dutch's downfall. She also made a decision that would change everything. Stephanie St. Clair reached out to Dutch Schultz's most dangerous enemy, the Italian mob. Lucky Luciano, the boss of bosses, had been watching the war between Dutch and Stephanie with great interest. Dutch Schultz was a loose cannon who threatened the stability of organized crime in New York. His public battles, his newspaper coverage, his political scandals were bringing unwanted attention to all illegal operations. When Stephanie approached Luciano's representatives, she made a simple proposal. "Help me destroy Dutch Schultz, and I'll give you information about his entire organization. Bank accounts, hideouts, corrupt officials, everything." Luciano was impressed. Here was a black woman who'd outmaneuvered Dutch Schultz and was now offering to help eliminate him entirely. It was exactly the kind of strategic thinking Luciano respected. The alliance between the Queen of Numbers and the Italian mob changed the rules of the game completely. Suddenly, Stephanie wasn't just fighting Dutch Schultz. She was part of a larger war to restructure organized crime in New York City. Chapter 8. The Final Confrontation. February 3rd, 1932. Dutch Schultz finally tracked Stephanie to a safe house in the Bronx. He came with 20 men and enough firepower to level the building. This time, there would be no 60-second speeches, no photographs, no negotiations, just bullets. But when Dutch's men kicked down the door, the apartment was empty except for a single note on the table. Mr. Flegenheimer, while you've been chasing shadows, I've been destroying your empire. Check tomorrow's newspapers, SS. Dutch grabbed the note, crumpled it up, screamed in frustration. Stephanie St. Clair had outplayed him again. The next morning, every major newspaper in New York carried the same story. Dutch Schultz operation exposed. The articles contained detailed information about his breweries, his smuggling routes, his corrupt officials, his hidden bank accounts. Everything. But the real knockout punch came from the federal government. Using evidence provided by Stephanie's intelligence network, the IRS filed tax evasion charges against Dutch Schultz. The same charges that had destroyed Al Capone in Chicago. Dutch Schultz was finished. Not killed in a dramatic shootout, not eliminated by rival gangsters, destroyed by a black woman who'd outthought, outplanned, and outfought the most dangerous criminal in America. Chapter 9. The legacy Dutch Schultz fled New York in disgrace. He spent his remaining years running from federal authorities, hiding in small towns, reduced from a $50 million crime boss to a fugitive living in cheap hotels. He was eventually gunned down in a Newark restaurant in 1935, but by then he was already forgotten. Stephanie St. Clair returned to Harlem in triumph. Her numbers operation resumed, stronger than ever. The community that had supported her during the war embraced her as a hero. She'd proven that courage and intelligence could defeat money and violence. More importantly, she'd changed the rules of organized crime forever. After the Dutch Schultz War, no major gangster tried to muscle into Harlem's numbers racket. The lesson was clear. The Queen of Numbers was untouchable. Stephanie continued operating until the late 1930s when she retired wealthy and respected. She'd built an empire, fought a war, and won. She'd proven that in America, even in the criminal underworld, anyone with enough courage could claim their piece of the dream. But the real legacy of Stephanie St. Clair wasn't money or power. It was the 60 seconds when she looked the most dangerous man in America in the eye and refused to bow down. 60 seconds that proved respect cannot be taken by force. 60 seconds that changed history. The Queen of Numbers had spoken, and the world had listened. Years later, when people asked what made Stephanie St. Clair different from other gangsters, the answer was always the same. She didn't fight for money. She didn't fight for territory. She fought for respect. And respect once earned lasts forever. Dutch Schultz thought he could intimidate a black woman in Depression-era America. He thought money and violence were enough to break anyone's will. He learned the hardest lesson possible. Some people cannot be bought, cannot be threatened, and cannot be broken. Stephanie St. Clair was one of those people, and her 60-second response to Dutch Schultz's ultimatum became the stuff of legend. A moment when courage conquered fear. A moment when intelligence defeated brutality. A moment when the Queen of Numbers proved she was truly untouchable. That's the story they don't teach in history books. The story of how a woman from Guadeloupe became the most feared and respected figure in Harlem. The story of how 60 seconds of pure courage ignited a war that changed organized crime forever. Stephanie St. Clair, the untouchable Queen of Numbers who looked evil in the eye and never blinked.